Hello everybody, and thank you for joining me once again. We're going to finish off the 2005 Grade 7 Gauss in this video by looking at question number 25 together. How many different combinations of pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters use 48 coins to total $1? Okay. So you need to know a little bit about Canadian currency here. This is a Canadian contest. Fortunately, back in 2005, we used the same coins America does, and thanks to American cultural influence, even if you're writing this in a foreign country, you likely know a little bit about what these guys do. Okay? But we'll write them down nonetheless. So a penny is $0.01. A nickel, my favorite coin. By the way, we got rid of the penny in Canada in 2012 or something like that. So now the nickel is the lowest, and America still has its nickels. Or America still has its pennies. A dime is 0.1. And a quarter is 1/4 of a dollar. So 0.25. And if you didn't know that, I encourage you to stop the video, take note of that, try the question again for yourself. Okay? Now, assuming you've done that, or assuming you just kept watching because you already knew this sort of stuff, let's see what we can do. So we want to total $1. Keep that in mind. And we want to use 48 of these coins. 48 of these coins. So, what to do? So, one thing I note, and this is a little easier to note if instead you write a penny as 1 cent, a nickel as 5 cents, a dime as 10 cents, a quarter as 25 cents, and a dollar as 100 cents, which is another way to write our currency. It's a little easier to notice this because you don't often think of multiples when you're thinking with decimals. But notice that 3 of the coins and the total that we want are multiples of 5. Only the penny is not a multiple of 5. Okay? So if we use any pennies, we must use a multiple of 5. Okay? If you only use 3 pennies and somehow we're able to work these all together, when you divided the total by 5, you'd get a remainder of 3. But if your total is supposed to be $1, 100 cents, and you divide by 5, you don't get a remainder of 3. So we have to use a multiple of 5 number of pennies. But that's if we use pennies. So this gets us thinking, do we need to use any pennies at all? What if we just use nickels, dimes, and quarters? Well, the sad fact is they're way too big. Okay? Even if we use the smallest of these coins, the nickel, 5 cents, $0.05, 48 of them is way more than $1. Okay? So if we use no pennies, we at least, so the way to get the least amount of money here is to use using 48 nickels. You know, you could have 47 nickels and 1 dime, but that's going to be even more than 48 nickels. So if we show you can't do it with 48 nickels, there's going to be $2.40. All right. I'm probably going to drop the units here, and I might convert into centimeters because it's whole numbers. It's a little easier to work with, but this is way too big. So we must use some pennies. Okay. So now it becomes a question of, okay, how many pennies could we reasonably be working with? And we're going to have to experiment a little bit. Once we hit on a solution like, just throwing one out there, maybe 30 pennies, 5 nickels, and a quarter and a dime, or something like that, that gives 48 coins to give us $1, we could likely take that solution and manipulate it. If we take a look at their potential answers here, there's 3, 4, 5, 6, at most there's 8 ways to do what they're asking. Okay, there's lots of different ways to use 48 coins, but to get specifically $1, that's a little more restrained. So it's likely, not guaranteed, but likely, that the solutions are all a little related to each other. Like if you get one solution, then you can convert a certain number of pennies into a certain number of nickels and dimes, things like that. That's my guess, just with some experience with coin questions like this in the past. So I'd really like to get a way to do this with 48. Okay, and now I know, so I'm going to make a little bit of a chart. I'm going to see if I can do it just with nickels and pennies. I'm going to see what we can do here. So pennies, nickels, we'll add dimes and quarters in case we need them. But if we started with all nickels, what total would we have? Well, we'd have 2.40. Okay, that's not going to work. So what if we gave 5 of these nickels and turned them into pennies? Because remember, we need to use multiples of 5. Well, we'd have 43 nickels left to work with. Okay? And if we need to, grab your calculator. 43 times 0.05 plus 5 times 0.01. I get $2.20. $2.20. So by just shifting 5 of these nickels into pennies, I've gone down by 20 cents, or $0.20. And this makes sense, because 5 nickels is $0.25. 5 pennies is $0.05, the difference being 0.2. So if I were to add another 5 nickels and change them into pennies, I'd be down to 38. And I'd go down again to $2. Well, we can keep going. 15, 20. We'll have to actually go all the way up to, what do we need? We need to go down to $1, so that would be down by 5 copies of 0.2. But we can definitely get $1. So we need 5 copies of 0.2, so we need to shift over 5 times. So I think 35 pennies, and then what's left over? 13 nickels. Does that work? Well, 13 nickels is 0.65 cents, and 35 pennies is 35 cents, or $0.35. This does indeed add up to $1. So we've got a solution. Fantastic. Okay. So 35 pennies and 13 nickels. And this was just a way to do it with all pennies and nickels. So is there a way to do it with all pennies and dimes? Is there a way to do it with all pennies and quarters? How about pennies, nickels, and dimes? Pennies, nickels, and quarters. Pennies, dimes, and quarters. Pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters. But these are the things we got to think about. And if at any point we ever reach 8, we know we're done, because they didn't give us any more. They didn't say, oh, 9's a possibility, so as soon as we hit 8 ways to do it, we're done. Will we get there? I guess no. But if I had to guess at the very end of this, if time ran out and I didn't have a better idea, then I would actually probably guess 8. Okay? Because there's no way it could be more than that. So that might be a process of elimination thing. Maybe that's just the only way to do this question, is by process of elimination. So once we get 4 different ways to do it, we know A3 can't be the right answer, and we're narrowing ourselves down. And as we continue to progress in this question and accumulate more ways to do it, we'll be able to say, nope, it's not 3, it's not 4, and so on. Okay? So with that in mind, it's very unlikely that we're ever going to be able to say yep, we're done, there's no other ways to do it. And so if that's going to be the case, if it's very hard to say, we're done, I've exhausted all possibilities, then it's likely they didn't intend for us to be able to do that. And so 8 would be the answer by exhaustion. Okay? But let's get back to it. And that's enough of how to think through a multiple choice question. We've got one way to do it. Now let's try all pennies and dimes. Okay, maybe we can do this, maybe we can't. Now a dime, if we gave all the dimes, we would have $4.80. Now as soon as we take 5 of these dimes and convert them into pennies, suddenly we have 4.3, but with 5 additional pennies, so 4.35. That's a difference of 0.45. So we can do it again, and we'd get 3.90. And we could keep going down. Now, what do we want? We want $1. So if we subtract off $1 from here, we're going to get 2.90. Is 2.90 a multiple of 0.45, an integer multiple of 0.45? I'm betting no, but I can always grab my calculator and figure out. No, it's not. So the best that we could come up with is to do this 6 more times. So 6 more times, that would transfer 30 more, we'd get 30 more pennies, so we get 40 pennies, and we'd get 8 dimes. And we would be left with 40 cents plus 80 cents, that'd be 120 cents or $1.20. And this is as close as we can get right now. But so if we changed another 5 dimes into 5 pennies, we'd be down at 0.75. And that wouldn't be helpful. So what did we learn? We can't do only dimes and pennies. But I'll tell you something I think we might be able to do. We have 20 here. Can we get rid of this 20? Not by changing dimes into pennies, but by somehow changing dimes into nickels. And that I think we can do. So if I change, so let's add in the nickels column. Now if I change a dime into a nickel, we go down, we lose 5 cents. Now we're at 1.15. So if we change, and we go 4 dimes and 4 nickels, and 40 pennies, we're going to get the $1 that we crave. Because 4 nickels would be 20 cents plus 40 cents for the dimes plus 40 cents for the pennies. That would be 100 cents or $1. So it is possible to do it with pennies, nickels, and dimes. Interesting. So we've got 2 ways to do it, and 1 way that actually won't work. Now, something that's puzzling my brain, is there another way to do it with pennies, nickels, and dimes? Is there a way to maybe convert a little bit? That's something I'm thinking about, because I don't want to move on from pennies, nickels, and dimes and start considering things with quarters if there are other ways to do it with pennies, nickels, and dimes. So what if, just for a second, we backtrack and say, okay, we're not at 40 and 8, we're maybe at 35 and 13 dimes. 35 pennies, 13 dimes, and 0 nickels. What would we have then? Well, we'd have 130 plus 35, we'd have 165. But now I can start converting dimes into nickels. Can I convert it enough? And if we slowly convert, we'll, put 1 there and 12 there. You'll find pretty quickly that, yeah, we can start going down, but to get down to $1, we'll have to change all our dimes into nickels. And that's something we already dealt with. We already dealt with this case. Okay. What if instead we had 30 pennies? So, pennies, nickels, dimes, total. If we had 30 pennies, how many dimes would we have? We'd have 18, and so we'd have 210, and we'd want to convert some of these into nickels. Well, we'd be out of luck. We'd run out of dimes. Even if we converted all of them over, we'd still be way too high. Okay, we'd have 120. That just wouldn't be enough, and then some of these nickels would have to convert into pennies. So this appears to be the only way to do it with pennies, nickels, and dimes. You can't do it with pennies and dimes. You can't do it with nickels and dimes. So great. The only thing we've left to add into the mix is quarters. So we're almost done, actually. At least I hope. And we've got 2 ways to do it so far. Okay, pennies and nickels, only one way to do it there. Pennies, nickels, and dimes, only one way to do it there. Now let's try just pennies and quarters, and we'll add in nickels and dimes as we need. And now if we had all 48 in quarters, what would we have for our total? Divided by 4, we'd get $12. That's a lot. And if we take 5 of these and convert them into pennies, we'll have 43 quarters, which I'm going to have to grab my calculator in order to work with, but 43 times 0.25 is 10.75 plus the 0.05 from the pennies. We'd have $10.80, or $10.80. Okay, so what's happened? We've gone down by $1.20. Why? Because 5 quarters is 1.25, and 5 pennies is 0.05, and that does leave us a difference of 1.20. So, can I keep going down and get $1? Well, what would I need to do? I would need to lose $9.80 all in 120. So I'd need to have an even division here. 9.8 divided by 1.2. Doesn't quite work. The closest we can get is 8 steps. So what happens if we remove 120 times 8? So that's 9.6. We'd be left with 1.20. So after 8 steps, we'd have 1.20, and that would be, I think, 45 pennies and 3 quarters. Yeah, because that'd be 45 cents plus 75 cents. Okay. So, we can't quite do it with all pennies and quarters because we couldn't even convert these remaining quarters to pennies as is. This is the lowest we can get that's a multiple of 5. But could we change some of these quarters into dimes or nickels? Absolutely. What if I want to just change a quarter into a nickel? We'd be left with 2 there. So we'd get 50 from the 2 quarters, and then 50 from the pennies and the nickel. And we'd have $1. Well, great. We've got 3 ways to do it now. Okay. What if instead I wanted to convert the quarters into dimes? Could I do it then? So I'd have 3 quarters, I convert one of them into a dime? Well, no, this is going to be too much. Okay, having a dime instead of a nickel, that's just too much. And if we converted 2 of the quarters into dimes, we'd have too little. You'd have 0.90. So we can't do it with just pennies and dimes and quarters, I think. Well, hold on. Let's go back a moment. So sure, we can't do it with 45 pennies, dimes, and quarters. But what if we were back here at, say, 8 and 40? What would we have? We'd have $2 from the quarters, and so we'd have $2.40. Okay. Now I need to get rid of some of this, and let's say we put 4 of the quarters into dimes. We still have $1 in quarters, which is not good. So we need to convert more of them. 4 quarters is always $1, so we need to have, and we can't have. We have 3 of those quarters, and then 40 pennies. That's too much. So what if we had 2 quarters? And well, we could do it with 1 dime, but that's just too much there. We'd need 6 dimes. 6 dimes is 60 cents. 2 quarters is 50 cents. Already we're over $1. How about with nickels? Could we do it with 6 nickels? That's 50, that's 40, and 6 nickels is 30. That's way too big. How about if we just had 1 quarter and only nickels? So that'd be 25, 35, and 40. That actually works. So 40 pennies, 7 nickels, and 1 quarter works just fine. Okay. What if we had only 1 quarter and, well, we'd have to have 7 dimes, and again, that'd be too much. I have no idea how I flipped to that page, but there it is. So I think we're a little stuck, because once we go down to 0 quarters, we've got nothing left to do. Could we go back to 35 pennies and having only a few quarters? Yeah, there's no reason not to. So 35 pennies and hold on, I'm starting to lose organization, and that is a terrible thing to do with a question like this, because then you end up missing things that you could count or counting things extra. So right now, I was doing it fine and organized, but I've started to lose my method. So we had one way to do it, 35 pennies, 13 nickels. And then 40 pennies, 4 nickels, 4 dimes. We only had those 2 methods. Then we earned a brand new one with 45 pennies, 1 nickel, 2 quarters. Okay. And then 40 pennies, 7 nickels, and 1 quarter. So what's going on here? So I think, let's write some of this out. We can have at most 3 quarters. We were able to solve everything when it wasn't quarters. The second I started adding in quarters, I started losing myself in my train of thought. We can have at most 3 quarters. Now there's probably a reason why we can't have exactly 3 quarters, because everything keeps messing up. So 3 quarters, and even 45 pennies, we saw that that's still too much. It's $1.20. So only 0, 1, or 2 quarters. We know what happens with 0 quarters. Right? You can have 35 pennies, 13 nickels, and 0 dimes. Or you could have 4 dimes, 4 nickels, and 40 pennies. Now, if we had only 1 quarter, we have 1 quarter, that would mean that we have 75 cents left to make up with, just with pennies, nickels, and dimes. Okay. And we'd have to use 47 coins. Okay. Now we're a little more on track. So I lost myself at a little bit there. This is actually turning out to be a pretty long Gauss 25. But, so with 37 coins, or sorry, 47 coins, what can we have? What can we have? So we at most can have at most 7 dimes. We'll have our pennies, our nickels, and our dimes, and we want to add up to 75 cents. So suppose we just did it with dimes and pennies. You can have something like 45 pennies and 2 dimes, but the total there is going to be 65 cents. I'm converting back to cents because I don't want to keep writing the 0.1 or the 0 point whatever. So we can't do that, and that's the most pennies we could have. Well, what if we had we could have 45 with 2 nickels? No, that's too little. It's too little. So we can't do 45 pennies. What if we did 40 pennies? Well, we could have 7 dimes, but that's a little too much. So we're going to have some sort of connection between dimes and nickels. So if we had 7 pennies, that would be 75 right on the money. So 40 pennies, 7 nickels, and 1 quarter. I think we already had that scenario. Yeah, right here. Okay. What if we had 35 pennies? So we have 12 coins to make up. You will have at least 12 nickels. If this is too much, then it's too much. So 12 nickels, that would be 60 cents. So this would be 95 cents. No way that's going to work. So this is the only one that works with 1 quarter. All right, how about 2 quarters? We must make 50 cents, because 2 quarters account for half of the dollar. There's 50 cents left to make up with, and we have 46 coins left to use. So pennies, nickels, and dimes, and our total. All right, what could we have? Well, we could have 45 pennies, and then I guess, so that leaves 5 cents, so we'd have to have 1 nickel. And that would give us 0.5. So we can't have 1 dime there. What if we just had 40 pennies? Okay, what if we had 40 pennies? Well, we'd have 6 coins left to work with, and we'd have to make up 10 cents. At least we'd have 6 nickels. At most, we'd have 6 dimes. But that would at least put us to 0.7, so that's way too much. So we can't have even further pennies, because 35 pennies, we'd have even more nickels, and that would still backfire. So it looks like there's 1, 2, 3, 4 ways to do this. And rather than losing myself, I have organized myself by singling out the number of quarters, and then the next thing I did was fill in the most number of pennies I could. Okay, so I'm confident now in that answer, whereas I got a little disorganized there, and that's a bad thing to have happen. Had I gotten disorganized on the contest, I likely would have skipped to another question, gone back and checked some of the simpler things just for a little bit. But I think B is our final answer. And that's all she wrote. I'm going to hope I didn't miss anything. Could probably go over this for a few more minutes and double check that I didn't miss anything with the 0 quarters. But that's the part we did the most methodically. Okay, we said, how many dimes or how many nickels and pennies could we do? We can't do only dimes and nickels, or only dimes and pennies. We have to have some pennies. And so then we had one with just nickels and one with a hybrid of nickels and dimes. Okay. So, not bad at all. I'm confident in that beat. So, we're going to leave it there. That finishes off the contest. Hopefully you guys did well. If I made a mistake, hopefully you guys didn't. And I don't just mean this question, I mean anywhere. I always hope that if I do make a mistake that you guys are better than me. Because you're the ones who are likely going to be writing these contests coming up. And I do wish you well. Thanks for joining me. We'll get to another grade 7 Gauss at some point. But I think the next thing is the grade 8 Gauss. So join me for that one if you'd like to. Thanks for watching.